whenever it's 6 o'clock. I hereby call to order the Roseville City Council meeting for Monday, May 4th, 2026. Mr. City Manager, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Graff.
Here.
Councilmember Strawn.
Here.
Councilmember Schroeder.
Here.
Councilmember Bauer.
Here.
Mayor Rowe.
Here. And with us at the dais, by way of introduction, we have our City Attorney, Rachel Tierney, who's on my right at the end of the dais. We have our City Manager, Pat Trudgeon, who's on my left at the other end of the dais. We have various staff who will be participating in the meeting, and we'll make those introductions as those agenda items come up on the agenda. Would ask folks if you have a cell phone to make sure and silence it, or otherwise assure that it doesn't disrupt our meeting this evening. And also, I should point out for members of the public, we do have extra copies of the agenda on the back table under the big clock by the back door, and also which are yours to use in reference to follow along with the meeting. We also do have one complete set of all the meeting materials that are before the council this evening in a 3-ring binder, which is available for the public to share. With that, we will ask folks to stand if you're able for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so the first item on our agenda then, following that preliminary business, is to consider tonight's agenda. And as always, I'll check with Mr. Trudgeon first. Are there any changes requested from a staff perspective this evening?
No changes by staff.
All right, checking with the council then, are there any changes that the council requests to the agenda or items that the council would like removed from consent for separate consideration this evening? Does not appear to be the case. We'll do a quick check with members of the public. There is a section of our agenda called Section 12 this evening, which is called Approve the Consent Agenda. These items are normally taken up as a single motion at the end of the meeting as fairly routine business, usually not involving a lot of public input, but we do want to make sure at the beginning of the meeting, if somebody is here for one of those items in Section 12 of tonight's agenda, known as the consent agenda, this would be a great time to let us know. And we'll move that item forward for you to be able to make a comment or ask a question as you would like for that item. Is there anyone here this evening for an item in Section 12 of tonight's agenda? Does not appear to be the case. With that, then a motion to approve the agenda as presented would be in order.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Schroeder, seconded by Councilmember Strawn to approve the agenda as presented. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye opposed. That passes unanimously. We have our agenda for this evening. I do want to just do a quick check with the audience. Is the sound coming okay over the PA this evening? Okay. Very good. Then with that, the next item on our agenda is general public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to items that are not on this evening's agenda, but may be related to city business or also of interest to people in the community. We will provide opportunity for public comment during agenda items, but we do always, by rule, provide this opportunity at the start of each meeting. Is there anyone here this evening who wishes to speak under general public comment at the start of the meeting? It does not appear to be the case then. We will move then to recognitions and donations. And our first item in that area this evening is a series of proclamations. We've got 3. The first is a proclamation related to Peace Officers Memorial Day and National Police Week. The proclamation, I'll read it, and then a motion from the council to approve would be in order. The proclamation reads as follows. Whereas the Congress and President of the United States have designated the week in which May 15th occurs as National Police Week, and May 15th itself as National Peace Officers Memorial Day, and whereas the Roseville Police Department plays an essential role in safeguarding the rights and freedoms of all members of the community, and whereas it is important that all citizens know and understand the duties, responsibilities, hazards, and sacrifices of their law enforcement agency, and that members of our law enforcement agency recognize their duty to serve the people by safeguarding life and property, by protecting people against violence and disorder, and by protecting the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression. And whereas the men and women of the Roseville Police Department unceasingly provide this vital public service, Now, therefore, be it first resolved that the City of Roseville declares the week of May 10th to May 16th to be National Police Week in the City of Roseville, and May 15th as National Peace Officers Memorial Day. And be it further resolved that the City of Roseville calls upon all citizens to join in commemorating law enforcement officers past and present who, by their faithful and loyal devotion to their responsibilities, have rendered a dedicated public service to their communities and have established for themselves an enviable and enduring reputation for preserving the rights and security of all citizens. And be it further resolved to observe May 15th as National Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of law enforcement officers who, through their courageous deeds, have made the ultimate sacrifice in service of their community, including Roseville Officer Howard Johnson and Officer Bruce Russell, or who have become disabled in the performance of duty, and let us recognize and pay respect to the survivors of those fallen heroes.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Groff, seconded by Councilmember Schroeder to approve that proclamation. Any discussion on the motion? Councilmember Schroeder?
I just wanted to say that I think our police department does an amazing job, and sometimes they don't get all the credit they deserve, and so I'm really glad to see that we have a formal way to show some of that. So thank you all for all the service you've done for Roseville.
You're here. Councilmember Groff.
You know, and I would like to add to that, especially this year, because it's not been the easiest year to be a police officer, and it's greatly appreciated.
And I would just add that I think there's been perhaps too many years recently where it's not been an
True.
easy year to be a police officer, and so hopefully we can have some years where it's a little bit easier to be a police officer. I think both our law enforcement officers and the community would appreciate it. With that, we have the motion before us to approve that proclamation. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. That proclamation is approved. Next, in the vein of recognizing a public service, the next proclamation is National Public Works Week. The proclamation, excuse me, the proclamation reads as follows. I get a little choked up on public works. It reads, whereas public works professionals build and maintain infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to the resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and the well-being of the people of Roseville. And whereas these infrastructure, facilities, and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals at all levels of government and in the private sector, who are responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting our transportation, water supply, water treatment and solid waste systems, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential for our citizens. And whereas Roseville's 34 public works employees work around the clock and whose responsibilities include 100 miles of pathways, 123 miles of roads, 162 miles of water mains, 276 miles of sanitary and storm sewer pipe, and 5,842 associated manholes, as well as 335 vehicles and pieces of equipment. And whereas it is in the public interest for citizens and civic leaders to gain knowledge of and maintain an ongoing interest and understanding of the importance of public works and public works programs in Roseville by signing up for construction updates, watching presentations made to the Public Works Environment and Transportation Commission, and participating in engagement opportunities when public input is sought about public works. And whereas 2026 marks the 66th annual National Public Works Week and I lost my train. There we go. 66th Annual National Public Works Week, sponsored by the American Public Works Association. Now, therefore, be resolved, the City of Roseville does hereby proclaim the week of May 17th through 23rd, 2026, as National Public Works Week.
So moved.
Second.
All right, that's been moved by Councilmember Schroeder, seconded by Councilmember Strawn. Discussion on that motion? Councilmember Schroeder?
I would just say, when you look at how many miles that you have to keep an eye on, I think Public Works, the good thing about that is when you are not in people's minds is a good thing, because when you are, it's usually when something's going wrong. So I think I haven't gotten a lot of calls, so I take that as a good sign. So thank you for all you do.
All right, here. Other discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye opposed? That passes unanimously, and that proclamation is approved. And then finally, a proclamation in relation to Poppy Days in Roseville. And that proclamation reads as follows. Whereas after the First World War, inspired by the opening lines of John McCrae's wartime poem In Flanders Fields, and championed by international humanitarian workers Moina Michael of the United States and Madame Guerin of France, the poppy was adopted in many countries to commemorate the sacrifices of those who have been killed in war. And whereas the United States Veterans of Foreign Wars in 1922 officially designated the poppy as a symbol of remembrance and conducted their first Poppy Day drive that year, and in 1924 the VFW registered the Buddy Poppy as its official commemorative poppy. And whereas the VFW Buddy Poppies are assembled by disabled and needy veterans, and the proceeds of the use of the Buddy Poppies as a fundraising campaign are used exclusively for the benefit of disabled and needy veterans and the widows and orphans of deceased veterans. And whereas the basic purpose of the annual distribution of Buddy Poppies by veterans of foreign wars is eloquently reflected in the desire to honor the dead by helping the living. And whereas each year, members of the Roseville Anderson Nelson VFW Post 7555 distribute poppies at local sites the weekend before Memorial Day to raise awareness about the service of veterans and the importance of Memorial Day. Now, therefore, it be resolved firstly that the City of Roseville hereby declares May 15th and 16th, 2026, to be Poppy Days in Roseville for the distribution of these symbols of appreciation for the sacrifices of our honored dead, and further urges the citizens of this community to recognize the merits of this cause by contributing generously to its support through donations for Buddy Poppies on those days, or any time, I should add. And be it further resolved that the City Council urges all patriotic citizens to wear a Buddy Poppy as mute evidence of our gratitude to the men and women of this country who have risked their lives in defense of the freedoms which we continue to enjoy as American citizens.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Groff, seconded by Councilmember Schroeder to adopt the proclamation of Poppy Days in Roseville. Discussion on that motion.
Nope.
Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. That proclamation is approved. All right, that then brings us to our business items this evening. We have first business item stands sort of alone as a separate action by the city, which is for the City Council to convene as the Board of Adjustments and Appeals to consider an appeal of a variance board denial of a variance to the minimum number of required electric vehicle charging stations and the required number of electric vehicle service equipment as required at a project proposed at 2700 Snelling Avenue. So we will so convene as the Board of Adjustments and Appeals. I'll just quickly outline the process a little bit for folks. So this first came before the Variance Board of the City of Roseville, which is essentially a subcommittee of the Planning Commission. They are charged with considering requests for variances from the city code. At the time of that consideration, the variance board denied the request for the variance. And as is outlined in our code, there is a process by which applicants can appeal such denials, which is what brings the item before the Board of Adjustments and Appeals this evening. And hopefully I haven't taken away too much of Mr. Paschke's presentation, but Mr. Paschke, Thomas Paschke, is our Roseville planner, and he is going to bring this before the council. So what will happen is Mr. Paschke will sort of outline the context and the background and information related to the case, and perhaps we'll answer some questions from the board. And then we'll provide an opportunity also for the representative or representatives of the party making the appeal to make their case to the board as well, and perhaps stand for questions from the board members. Then there will be a quick opportunity for any clarifications that may need to happen by either party, and then we'll provide an opportunity for public comment, as we always do for agenda items of the council, and then we'll proceed to consideration of the requested appeal of the variance. And with that, I'll turn it over once again to your city planner, Thomas Paschke, to bring this appeal before us.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. This is a request to consider an appeal by Hempel Real Estate for the variance denial that took place on April 4th. The consideration to a variance from Table 101301 2, which is the minimum number of required electrical vehicle charging stations, and Section 101304D 2D1 regarding the required number of electrical vehicle service equipment. This is regarding a specific project that's to be developed at 2700 Snelling Avenue. So the specifics of that variance are the request was to allow 8 of the charging stations when 26 would normally be required, and 22 of the EV Ready or EVSE, the service equipment stalls, when 53 would be required. And that is all based on a parking lot of 528 total parking stalls for the proposed 125,400 square foot medical office and research facility. And you have the report that went to the variance board in your packet. So as I indicated, it went to the variance board on April 1st. That board held the public hearing and voted 2-1 to deny the variance. And the applicant has appealed that. This evening, you're charged with determining, or what the board is to do is to either deny or grant the appeal of the variance and then list the findings that you've determined support that decision. And you have a resolution in your packet that explains that. And I conclude my introduction of the topic.
All right, thank you, Mr. Paschke. Are there questions from the board members for staff in relation to this matter? Member Strawn.
So, in light of the proposed parking lot, which looks like it's between 4 and 5 some hundred spots, do you know how the number of 8 was arrived at?
I don't specifically know how they came to the determination that they would propose the 8 EV stations and the 22.
Okay,
That may be a question for the appealing party.
just in light of 10% of vehicles being EV at this point, that would be 50. And so I'm just curious to know where an 8 would come from in a spot. Then I wanted to know, was the city tasked with looking at other similar sized businesses or organizations that might be in a manufacturing or in a lab type setting elsewhere in the city to see what would be a comparable rate for expectations?
Well, what I can say is we've only had 2 fairly large parking lots that we've had to apply these new standards that were adopted about 2 years ago. And so the first was at Rosedale, and it had to do with the Dick's Sporting Goods. They received a variance. So part of perhaps what the applicant came up with was something of a very similar number based on some of that information that had been provided by the variance that was granted to that project. But there hasn't been another project of this magnitude that the city has had to apply these new standards to.
Okay. And do you know if the manufacturer or the organization, if they were intending to charge for the use of the charging stations, or if these were to be an amenity to the staff that worked there?
I believe these were to be for employees only and not for the general public,
Okay.
which is slightly different than what Rosedale's are.
All right. Thank you.
Right, are there other questions? Member Schroeder.
Yes, originally when this variance was applied for, the staff did support the variance, correct?
That is correct.
And I think part of it was too, because since it was new, and I see the, our commission has it on their agenda to maybe review the ordinance to maybe see if it's reasonable, because part of this was not knowing if we needed to adjust it going forward. So it was part of the reason staff recommended it, that after you've had some experience that this seemed reasonable, or what was the?
Well, I think there were a couple of things. One is that the applicant provided a parking study and information related to their research as it relates to electrical vehicle charging stations, as well as from staff's perspective that it was always understood that with a new ordinance that there may be certain instances where things don't necessarily match, and that we'd have to go back and review and determine what actually is a better number perhaps than what is currently identified in the code.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Member Groff.
Somewhat of a follow-up. I understand that this is an amenity for employees, but are the employees charged for using the station, or is it free?
That I don't know. I have no idea.
Well, I'll ask the
Right.
people.
I did have one clarifying question, and I had asked staff about it a little bit beforehand just to make sure they understood the question. But in our code, we do have the ability to potentially cap the requirement on the basis of cost. And I just wanted to check whether that calculation was a part of this process that got us to this point or not.
Well, it wasn't something formally done. Staff determined that this project would probably exceed what that number would be. And so that was never a topic that was broached.
Okay.
And so, a project would have to be under about $10 million in order to have that rule apply. And we felt that this project, fully developed, would exceed that number.
All right. And there was definitely, as I was reading and attempting to interpret the code, some question as to whether the cost referenced was the total project cost or the parking portion of the project cost. So that may be something else that perhaps the Planning Commission can take a look at if they're going to be looking at this ordinance. But thank you for clarifying that.
Yes.
All right. If there's no further questions from members of the board, we'll provide an opportunity for the party making the appeal, representatives of Hempel Real Estate, to come forward and introduce yourselves and provide your case for the granting of the appeal. Hello and welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. My name is Brandon Champo. I'm Executive Vice President at Hempel Real Estate. Our request tonight is not about avoiding the EV charging. It's about approving a phased compliance approach that matches what the employee demand for these spaces will be. This is a private employer. I wish I could say the name, but I can't yet until they get their final board approval, which is somewhat contingent upon how some of the outcomes of some of these meetings turn out. But this is a 125,000 square foot medical lab. It's going to employ between 500 and 700 employees. Our parking study that we completed took into account what that EV charging demand would be day one, and that's to answer one of the earlier questions about why we came up with 8. That was a result of that study that was done internally. We are, excuse me, we are attempting to get as close to the code compliant language as we can, while also preserving the ability to expand the EV charging in the future. Understanding that the 8 that the employees are demanding today may be 25 in 2 years, and we'll have the capacity to install the extra stations at that time. But day one, the demand was for the 8 spaces. The other thing, the parking counts in this project are kind of difficult to sort of pin down because it's a multi-shift situation. There'll be and the difference that between the 2 shifts, there has to be employees together at that time. So the parking demand is kind of inflated. The actual number of employees that will be on site at any given time is significantly less than the 500 stalls. But during that shift change, because of the delicate nature of the laboratory business and everything, there's kind of these maximum points during the day where there will be a lot of employees on site for about an hour, and then those employees that are in the previous shift will leave, go home, and then the next shift takes over. So that inflates the parking demand. That's really, or it inflates the number of stalls that we're kind of being required to install day one. But the bottom line is that we're really trying to come up with what we think is a balanced and phased approach here that meets this private employer's demand for day one, provides the flexibility to provide more stalls in the future if employees are demanding it, and then we will install the infrastructure that allows that expansion to happen at that time.
All right. Are there questions for the appealing party? Member Strawn?
Thank you. So What is the current size of this employer where it is located elsewhere?
It is a local employer that would be consolidating 17 divisions into this building.
So how many locations are there currently?
I don't know the total number of locations currently.
Up to 17 potentially?
It's 17 laboratory divisions moving into this building that would move into this building. Number of locations that they operate around the Twin Cities is significant.
Okay. And do any of the current locations have EV chargers?
As far as I know, no. They were surprised by this ordinance.
Okay. So given that 10% of the vehicle sales at this point are said to be EV, how did you arrive at the number that you came up with of 8 if you don't have any EV charging stations at any of your 17 locations at present?
That was based on the parking study that we did, which required talking to the internal operations team to understand what that demand from the current employees here would be.
Okay. I don't know if that would be a real good assessment, though. If you don't currently have EV charging, someone wouldn't count on that at work.
Well, a lot of the employees that have electric vehicles also have charging stations at home. And so some of them, maybe 10% of the workforce is driving an electric vehicle, but said they didn't necessarily need to have a charging station at work because they can charge it overnight.
Well, just anecdotally, someone I know who works for a trucking and manufacturing organization, their parking lot handles 300 cars. They have 10 charging stations, which are always full, and you have to sign up for them in order to use them at work during the day. Another organization that's agriculture and food science that is very near to here is about 200 spots, and their spots, their 8 chargers are always full. So I think it's kind of, if you build it, they will come kind of thing. So I think that if you have no reference by which you are making that count and you are just taking a number out of the air, it's kind of confusing how you decided that what you have is adequate when you don't really know what you may or may not need. You don't have any idea what the interest would be.
Well, we do based on the parking study that we did.
Who did you ask in the
Well,
parking study, though?
I guess we're not necessarily debating
Okay,
information at this point. It's asking and answering questions, if that's all right.
all right.
I think Councilmember Graff, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering if you are charging for those, most people charge for that, or is it a benefit or an not?
I don't know the answer to that, if they're going to charge employees or not. I don't think they want to charge employees for it, so, but I don't know that answer.
Okay, that's pretty unusual. And what, is it a parking lot that's gated and someone watching to see who comes and goes from the parking lot, or how are they going to handle it?
Yeah, they'll have their own, security obviously on site. It's a highly specialized lab facility, so they're also concerned about that's why they don't want public use of the EV charging. They don't necessarily want to bring a ton of attention to the building, so they will have security on site that would monitor it. And then, as far as I understand, the EV stations would require some sort of code access or something that employees would be given, so the public won't be able to use it.
And would it be like permit parking then, so they have some way of knowing which cars are there?
As far as if a car pulls into a station and didn't get approval internally,
Yeah.
I'm assuming they'll have some sort of permit system in
So it
place.
is not going to be public access?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the appealing party? Member Bauer.
Given what the ordinance says and the number of stalls necessary, you're looking at, like in here, you state 1,200 amps of 3-phase power. Is that even feasible to bring onto the site? at this point?
It's very expensive. I mean, the base building power requirement for the entire facility was 3,000 amps, and just to add the power required for these EV charging stations requires over a third of the total power usage of the entire building, just to meet the code ordinance.
Given that kind of size and demand, is that Excel even available to do that kind of work?
They, as far as I know, yes, there's a long lead time on securing electrical infrastructure, but I think that they would be able to provide that capacity if it was absolutely needed.
Thank you.
And just to clarify, is that for the 8 that are being proposed, or for the
To meet the
larger-
ordinance would require
meet the ordinance.
1,200 additional amps for a building that has 3,000 amps in its truck-based billing service to serve the entire facility.
Thank you. Other questions? I did have a question on sort of the time frame of the project. What is the expectation to sort of get construction underway and have the project completed?
Well, if things go well tonight, the board meets on Thursday to approve the project, and if that's the case, then we would be announcing who the tenant is probably the next day, and we would be hoping to break ground within 30 days.
Right. Project completion estimated.
The base building improvements will be done about year end, maybe early January. And then the tenant improvements, which are the significant portion of a project of this type, will take about 9 to 12 months. So they would be fully operational year end 2027.
Got it. All right, thank you for that. If there's no other questions, thank you for coming forward to provide your case, and stand by if any other questions come up. We will provide an opportunity for members of the public who may wish to speak to this requested variance appeal at this time. And while members of the public are coming up, we would just note that the rule for public comment is a 3-minute time limit by council rule. Begin the comments with your name and street or address. Address comments or questions to the council, the board in this case, and depending on the number of speakers, we'll provide answers to any questions after that.
Hey, Roger Hessen, Wagner Place. I was just wondering, has anyone done any survey on as far as how the Dix has worked out that you lowered the number that they needed or they were supposed to make?
Over
I
at
just
the
wonder if
Rosedale.
anyone's ever looked at the Dix property to see if there's been not enough stations or if they put in more than they needed, even though they got a reduced thing. And then it seems like they know better how many they actually need than you guys do. So I would think if they will actually do the phased in, I would somehow make that a requirement, but I would leave it up to them. It's their business. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments and your question. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak to this item this evening? All right, doesn't appear to be the case. We'll close the opportunity for public comment. Just in response to the question, I don't know if staff can answer as to whether there's been any follow-up with the folks at Rosedale as to how that installation has been utilized or whether they wish they had more.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. We have not asked Rosedale to do that study, but I will say that we didn't feel, even if we had that information, we're not certain it would be an appropriate comparison because Rosedale is a commercial user, whereas this is a private employer, and that was sort of foundational to some of the findings that staff presented to justify why the variance might be reasonable. So we can certainly follow up with that, but we didn't for this particular exercise and request.
All right, and just for the benefit of the public, can you introduce yourself?
My name is Janice Gunluck. I'm the Community Development Director.
Thank you, Ms. Gunlock. Follow-up question from Ms. Strawn.
For Ms. Gunlock. Given that we have this ordinance and now we're being asked for a second time in short order to be diverging from it quite significantly, it seems like if we were to ask anyone to abide by it, then they would say, well, we wouldn't need to do that. Why do we have this ordinance in place, or what is the point of moving forward with this requirement if someone's able to make such a significant change and not abide by what we've put in our ordinances?
Well, I think there's a couple of different ways we can answer that question. First off, when the Planning Commission considered amending the zoning code to add EV charging as a requirement, we looked at communities throughout the metro area and virtually no one had a standard in place. Roseville is very committed to sustainability, and so we thought we needed to start somewhere, but we didn't have really good information to determine what the most appropriate standard would be. So when we presented information to the Planning Commission, we were very upfront with them that this is a good starting point. Like any ordinance, we need to look at it as an ability to evolve once we learn more as we apply it to projects, because a Only new development is subject to this ordinance. Roseville's a fully developed community. We don't have a lot of new projects that this ordinance gets applied to on a regular basis. And as was alluded to by our city planner, this is really only the second project that the ordinance has been applied to of a parking lot of this size. In fact, we've never applied the ordinance to a parking lot that is this big of a private employer, only a commercial employer, which has a different expectations in terms of users of those stalls as opposed to a private employer. The other point we want to make is the practical difficulty test is something that we felt the applicant has met in the sense that we haven't had a lot of projects come forward. This one was really unique based on the size of the lot, based on being a private employer, based on their parking study accounting for 3 different shifts with overlap. So the number of parking stalls, which the EV requirement is based on, is overly inflated because of the overlapping of shifts. So there were a variety of different reasons that we felt the applicant met the practical difficulty test, which is under the law in terms of granting a variance. The last point I want to make is, I think Councilmember Schroeder referred to it, the commission already has asked that this ordinance be evaluated. One could argue that that alone presents a practical difficulty for why the city council may want to consider overturning the variance, but of course that's a decision for you to make based on the information that staff has presented, as well as the applicant. But the Planning Commission packet for this Wednesday included some materials from a commissioner. This was a commissioner-initiated request with a memo outlining the reasons he thinks the commission should evaluate the ordinance. Based on the discussion we've heard from the commissioners, I have every expectation that the commission will vote in a majority to study this issue and bring forward amendments to you in the future for consideration. Again, it's up to you whether or not to adopt them, but that's sort of the background and history of the ordinance and the number of projects and why staff felt the approval was warranted here.
Thank you, Ms. Gunlock. I just wanted to follow up on a couple of things. One is the practical difficulty test is perhaps a little different than the historic variance requirement in terms of the difficulty not being of the property owner or developer's own making, so to speak. It's because of the circumstances and things like that, among other criteria.
Yep.
And so I appreciate that clarification and the fact that that was part of staff's consideration in supporting the original variance request. I think the challenge that we have, and maybe this may be more of a statement than a question, but we'll see how it turns out as I get started here. The challenge we have is that sort of legislating by variance doesn't feel like the right process either. I get concerned that each sort of request is sort of considered on its own and isn't in a context. So I appreciate that the commission is looking at perhaps updating the ordinance. I think we have this specific situation that we have to deal with as a request, an appeal of a variance denial. So we can work through that. We have our 2 choices, which is to either uphold the denial or grant the appeal. But I think as a part of this, I would expect perhaps the council will have some discussion about some things that we may wish the commission to look at or considerations to take into account. Because I do feel personally that a little more engaged process and a little more thoughtful process than sort of, it almost feels like legislation by variance is akin to spot zoning, something along those lines. And so I'm concerned about that. So maybe I'll leave it at that.
Well, and Mayor, I would just add, and I'm certainly not a lawyer and the city attorney can weigh in however she likes, but this particular reason was discussed at the variance board. And so the project timeline came up and there was this feeling that this was a really good project for this property. And while there was sort of this universal belief that we need to examine the ordinance, to deny the variance and require the applicant to wait for that process to take place, they didn't align. And so that presented another practical difficulty, especially since there was this belief that there really was a need to examine the ordinance and they couldn't wait for that process to unfold. I can certainly appreciate the concern that you mentioned, but it was discussed whether or not that reason makes sense for this council in making this decision, that's up for you.
Right, and I appreciate that additional context as
Yep.
well. Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other questions from members of the board at this time? Member Strawn?
So in this, there really is no compromise. Either we say 8 or we say 26 or whatever, and those are the two options that we have as a board at the moment.
I think I checked with Ms. Tierney on that, and I think that you are absolutely correct.
So there's no compromising or finding a ground that might be more amenable to not feel like we're selling the house without, getting anything but the tap, but.
So,
Tierney?
Mayor Rowe, Councilmember Strawn, the issue is kind of the legal framing of where you are. There's an application in front of you. You need to grant or deny that application. You could certainly give an indication that you may be willing to approve something less, but that isn't what's before you. And so anything else creates a hard record if they wanted to appeal your decision and it was in a gray area where it's sort of granted, it really creates a complicated record for you. So unfortunately, yeah, you need to grant or deny. You can certainly have a conversation about what you'd be willing to entertain in the future, but I would just encourage you to grant or deny today.
and members of the council, when the applicant originally came forward and worked with our city planner on this, Thomas and I talked about, well, what is the right number? Well, we don't know. This is the first really large project of a private employer that we've had to apply the ordinance to. That's why we asked them to seek the opinion of an outside expert by doing that parking study and providing at least some information from a qualified professional. I'm not a traffic engineer. I'm not an EV expert. And so that's where they came up with the 8 based on their particular business and their parking study. And so that's what they ended up coming forward with, because any other number that we would have came up with wouldn't have been grounded in any sort of science or fact.
Great, thank you, Ms. Gunlock. I did want to clarify too, and this may have to be clarified by the representatives of the folks making the appeal. So the study that we have attached that was in the materials for the variance board is the study by TC2, I believe. And that, as I read it, I did not necessarily see a specific recommendation on the number of EV spaces. It was talked about sort of overall parking counts, but I know it was mentioned that there was apparently like a survey done of employees or something along those lines that is maybe the basis for the 8, and maybe if the representatives
Would
of
defer to that.
people want to clarify that or address that. So I don't want to misinterpret what's been said.
So the specific question about the, how we arrived at the 8 again?
Yeah, so it's been said that the traffic study led to the 8, and the study that we have attached to the materials seems to just talk about the total number of spaces.
Parking demand,
And,
yep.
and I heard you say, I think during your earlier case, that the 8 was based on the employer's survey of their employees.
The
or
operations
something along those
team's
lines.
feedback,
Okay.
yes.
All
Yep.
right, so that's why I just want to clarify, when I don't want necessarily people pointing to the traffic study or the parking study that was done as the basis for the 8. The basis for the 8 was the analysis done.
Kind of the day one demand. And again, we are installing infrastructure to expand on that. And if all 8 are used, the first 90 days, if all 8 are used 24 hours a day and there's need for more, we have the ability to add the additional stations because we'll have the infrastructure in place.
All right, thank you for clarifying that. I
Yep.
appreciate that. All right, members of the board, we do have the request before us on the appeal to reverse the decision or the denial by the variance board of the requested variance to our parking standards for EV parking space numbers in our code. And as was just discussed, our two choices are to grant the appeal or to deny the appeal or uphold the decision of the variance board. I do think that there is some question as to what the right numbers should be, but we still do have to address that. Member Schroeder.
I would move to grant the appeal.
I'd second.
All right, it's been moved by Member Schroeder and seconded by Member Bauer to grant the appeal. I think we do have to provide, if I'm not mistaken, some findings.
Just point of order. Is it really a motion that we're carrying, or is it, since we're convened as a?
Well, it would be a motion, actually, there's a resolution in the packet. that needs some filling in of blanks as to the findings. And we can articulate findings this evening that can perhaps be memorialized as a follow-up, as I seem to recall. Excellent. So we would want to try to articulate those in our discussion on the motion that we have. And once again, the motion would be to adopt the resolution, adding the findings of fact, I think needs to be a part of it. So if the maker and seconder of the motion wish to begin by articulating some findings of one sort or another, we can attempt to incorporate those in appropriately.
I would
Mayor?
be happy to do
Oops,
that.
Ms. Tierney.
If I may just provide you the findings that are in your ordinance.
Okay.
In order to grant the variance, your ordinance requires that you find that the proposed variance is consistent with the comprehensive plan. You need to find that the proposal is in harmony with the purposes and intent of the zoning ordinances, that the proposal puts the subject property to a use in a reasonable manner, that there are unique circumstances to the property which were not created by the landowner, and that the variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality. I can
Thank you.
repeat that.
And those are actually articulated to a certain degree in
Yes.
or to a great
Page
degree.
12
in the,
of the,
right, or, yes,
Yes.
page 4 of 6 of the variance board packet, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
4 to 5.
Let's see.
So if the maker and seconder of the motion are comfortable with those as the basis for the motion, that may serve our purpose here.
I was going to say, because that was part of why I did
Yeah.
it, because based on
Okay.
that packet, yes.
And I would, please don't let me put words in your mouth, but I
Yes.
imagine that the granting of the appeal is in support of the original variance as outlined.
Absolutely. Because of that, because of the findings, because of the work the staff did ahead of time, and it's already outlined in the packet, that is why I felt that this was, that we needed to grant this. And on top of all the findings in the packet, which we can put in as noted versus going through and reading the whole thing, is that hopefully would be enough for our attorney. And then on top of that, I wanted to say that based on, we have such very little, as our Director of Community Development stated, we do not have a lot of information on what the right numbers are, and the only studies we have are what that they brought forward on the traffic study and their employee study, and so therefore, I didn't feel that we could randomly say the number was right or wrong, and considering that our variance, or we already have had variance in another situation, and on top of that, our commission has already decided that they needed to review that ordinance, that there was already some concern about it. I felt that we weren't on any kind of grounds to deny the appeal. So,
Right? Would you consider that discussion as to the motion, Member Schroeder?
yes.
Okay. As the seconder, Member Bauer.
I'm in agreement with everything Councilmember Schroeder stated. I am happy that the Planning Commission is going to take a look at this as well. I think mistakes were made in this original ordinance, or not mistakes, I should say, but not fully thinking through some of these concepts, especially with the difference between charging at home versus, charging at the workplace. I think we can end up doing something better to better serve Roseville residents, and I say that as a owner of multiple electric vehicles for many years.
All right, other discussion on the motion to grant the appeal. Member Groff.
I will support the appeal, probably for different reasons. I'm supporting it because it is a private parking lot, and it sounds like it would be a benefit to employees. One of the concerns I have is doing this variance on every time this comes up. That doesn't set a good precedence for governance, so I don't like that part of it, but in this case, I'm going to support it. I think that one of the reasons we wrote this ordinance was to encourage EV vehicle uses in the cities, in the city of Roseville. And everyone doesn't have charging stations at home, as Mr. Bauer says that he has at home. That's fine, but renters don't have them at home. So I was kind of hoping that over time, with this ordinance, we would be able to provide some places for renters and people who don't have those at home to be able to go in and charge. That doesn't sound like it would be the case with this situation. But I would like the planning commission to take that into consideration when they're rewriting these ordinances for us as they do that. So I think we need to look forward as to what's going to happen with EV. And, but in this case, I will support the variance.
Right, Member Strawn.
I believe in consideration of what the mayor said, as well as what I offered, I'm not in favor of this variable decision-making, and it is unfortunate that it is a time frame that is important to the organization, but I think it's important so that we are consistent with practices that I would vote to not grant the variance and withhold and uphold the decision made by the variance board for really the same reasons that the variance board mentioned in their outcomes, that they didn't feel that it met the 5 standards. And I just think that parking study doesn't speak anything to a recommendation on EV stations. The number is just pulled from the air from what I can tell. And for 17 organizations that currently, or facilities or more that currently have no EV stations, I don't know what grounds there would be for making a decision. I appreciate that the future is there, but it's so easy to not have to ever do it if you just say, I promise I will, but then we have no way to hold you to that at that point. So.
Right. I came into this reluctant to grant the appeal. I'm not sure that 8 is the right number, but I think the challenge we have is that I'm not sure what is the right number, and I think that's really the heart of this matter. I think also I've become a little more persuaded by the action that we already took with the variance for retail establishment, which was a significant reduction from the requirements. And that's potentially an environment where a level 2 type fast charging might have more demand for, customers and visitors to a retail establishment. So I am concerned about that. However, I am persuaded that based on the timing, based on the information, the findings that have been outlined, as well as the expectation that we'll be taking another look at this ordinance, that I think it makes sense to support the appeal at this time. I do want to take a few moments just to note a couple of things that I would encourage the Planning Commission to look at, since this is our last shot at this, at least for now, as they start getting into it. And that is, and I'm not sure practically how easy it is to do, and so that's going to be something to be looked at as well. It seems to me that one of our requirements for multiple or multifamily residences is like a level 1 standard, because that's long-term parking, overnight, whatever. I think it could be argued that in an employment situation, when you have employees there for a shift, it's very similar to overnight, that level 1 charging capability may be perfectly adequate for those types of spots, which certainly has less electrical demand and certainly has less infrastructure demand and cost. So that would be something I think should be a consideration for employment type parking situations. We may still want to have, and maybe the categories aren't necessarily the generalized land use, but the amount of the parking that's dedicated to short-term versus longer-term parking for whatever the land use type is. And I'm not sure, once again, this is for our experts to figure out the practicalities of it. But I think that can be something to take a closer look at. I also think that we may want to look at more tiers of lot sizes and adjust the standards accordingly. So there's some things that we can take a look at. Certainly I think the other factor is certainly is a lot more open to the public or less open to the public, and how does that all factor into it. So I think some of these things have already been discussed this evening, but hopefully that fills out a few more things that came to my mind as I was thinking about this. And certainly if other council members or other board members in this case had other thoughts, we could add those in.
Yeah, when it is looked at by the Planning Commission, to also take a look at, and you brought it up, residential versus commercial versus private businesses as well. Councilmember Groff noted I have charging at home. I'm sure he doesn't have a gas station at home, right? So these are decisions that you have to make when you purchase a vehicle, just like you have to decide how much fuel economy you want. It's a decision that you make. And we don't have demand on ordinances that private employers actually have to have gas stations on their properties as well. But I think it makes it, it's a good thing to look at, should we change this, break it out more between private, commercial, and residential? I'd be interested to have that as well.
All right. Other discussion or other thoughts? Member Graff?
One of my hopes with this ordinance was that, and I'm probably repeating myself, is that it would provide a source for people that do not have it at home. And no, we don't all have gas stations at home, Mr. Bauer, I understand that, but everyone cannot afford. I do actually have an EV charging station at home, but everyone cannot afford that. I just had those installed, and it's thousands of dollars. So if we're looking at the big picture and trying to plan ahead for how we get to zero carbon footprint, we need to think about these things, and we need to make it possible for renters and people that don't have these in their homes to find places in Roseville to charge their cars. So I would hope in the future, at some point, that people that are putting in parking lots would consider being maybe a good neighbor and maybe having it available to the public so that they could use those spots, even if it is in a private parking space. Maybe it'd be closer to the entrance to the lot or something like that. I think there's a lot of things that can be done here to make this more friendly to the planet, and that's my point of the EV charging stations.
All right, Member Strong.
I wanted to bounce off of that. In addition, that particular area where we're talking about right now is got a lot of high density housing. And so that would have been a really nice area to have added some EV charging stations. And again, it's modest income for the most part that's over in that area. And so these folks aren't as likely, and the homes have been there for a while, so they're not as likely to have their units be added to have that. So I feel like it's really important. You could charge the community for that opportunity to use it and offset some of the costs and be a good neighbor. So there's a lot of opportunity to be not just that. But I think this really speaks to the conversation we had several weeks ago about what is our green plan for our city. And I was asked, what are we willing to pay? And I think we have to remember that all of these little steps contribute to what we are as a green city. And it's not just, no, we don't have gas stations, but there's one on every corner. Unfortunately, at this point, there's not an EV charging station at every corner available to people. If you have it in your house or at your home, you're very fortunate, but most people do not have that opportunity. So you're really putting a dichotomy between haves and have-nots, and there's going to be more and more EV cars that are available for secondhand use that people aren't going to be able to figure out how to use if they don't have more than one resource. So, but I think this is where we have to, where our commitment to a green initiative as a city, this is part of it. This is part of how we connect and how we say we're really committed. It's not saying, oh, get a gas station at your place of business. That's not going to fit the bill.
All right. Hopefully that provides some guidance for the commission and staff. We do have the motion before us as a reminder that we have the resolution to grant the appeal based on the findings of fact that have been outlined by the maker and seconder of the motion. Is there any question as to what that is? Doesn't seem to be the case. The attorney's got it. All right. With that, we have the motion before us. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
That passes 4-1 with Member Strawn in opposition. All right. Thank you again for participating in our process, and hopefully it hasn't been too arduous, and certainly the next folks through will have perhaps a newer process to work through. But I'm glad that we're being thoughtful about it as we go forward, and hopefully we can inform ourselves and have a good solution. I think a challenge is that there isn't that infrastructure out there, but I also think that we have to be careful as to what we ask private businesses to attempt to do for the public as well. So it all is a factor. With that, then, we can proceed back to our business items this evening. We have 2 financial related business items for the city. The first is to consider approving a resolution supporting the Standard Communities conduit debt application, We have our Finance Director, Sam Magaranu, with us this evening to bring this item before the council for our consideration. I suppose officially I should adjourn the Board of Adjustments and Appeals and reconvene as the council. So done.
Nodding her head.
So done. We are back to the council and taking up item 9A. Welcome, Mr. Magaranu.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, member of the council. Indeed, we have with us this evening in front of us a resolution to support Standard Communities conduit debt application. We have with us this evening Rhonda Scobie from Taft Law, who is going to be giving us an overview of conduit debt information. A lot of this information has been provided with the packet, but it's good for her to answer any questions you might have. So she's present with us this evening, as well as Thomas Morrow from Standard Communities. He'll be answering any question relating to the project. With that, I'm going to let him come to the podium here and present, and then I'll be standing by for any further questions you may have.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Hello and welcome.
Thank you. Mayor, council members, my name is Rhonda Scobie. I am with the law firm of Taft, Stettinius, and Hollister. I am here today as your bond counsel, representing the city. The resolution before the council for your consideration tonight requests preliminary approval of conduit bonds for a 127 unit senior living multifamily housing development to be developed by Standard Communities. The resolution authorizes the city to assist the developer in applying to the Minnesota Department of Management and Budget for an allocation of authority to issue the bonds on a tax-exempt basis. The proposed resolution conveys that the city preliminarily agrees to act as the bond issuer and that a public hearing shall take place for the housing finance program if an allocation is awarded by the state. It's important to point out that the proposed application to the state requests bonding authority in a total principal amount of $23,750,000, but this is not a budget request to the city. No city funds would be used for the bonds. The city would not have any liability for the payment of the proposed issuance of bonds. All risk, liability, and cost related to the bonding process is to be assumed by the developer under the terms of the documents that would be entered into if the state approves the process. The proposed bonds would be issued by the city only on a conduit basis as authorized by state and federal law. This means the city is merely a conduit and the money and obligations flow only between the lender or trustee and the developer. No funds would flow to or from the city other than receipt by the city of its issuer's administrative fee. That administrative fee is 1% of the issuance of the bonds, and it's calculated based on the final amount that is issued as opposed to the maximum amount that is being sought from MMB. Because the city has no financial obligation with respect to the proposed bonds, the bonds would not be treated as a debt of the city or count against any of the city's debt limitations. Multifamily housing development bonds are not applied against the city's calendar year limit on bank qualified bonds either. Therefore, this issuance would not affect bank qualified status of the city's own general obligation bonds. The issuance of the bonds also does not affect the city's credit rating on bonds it issues for its own purposes. The developer is responsible for paying all costs of issuing the bonds, including Taft's fees as bond counsel. The city administrative fee for issuing the bonds would be based on the total amount of bonds issued. I'd also like to point out that the resolution is for a preliminary approval. So if approved and if the project receives authority from the state to move forward, we would coordinate with city staff to schedule a public hearing at a future time and future approval and consideration of the bonds and the related documents. I'm happy to take any questions on the conduit bonds, and Thomas Morrow with the developer is here to share information about the project itself.
Welcome, Mr. Morrow.
Hi. Mayor, Council, thanks for taking the time this evening. My name is Thomas Morrow. I represent Standard Communities. We're an affordable housing developer with projects across the country. And this resolution is for Roseville Seniors, which represents 127 units occupied by your constituents. And our plan here is to acquire the building and do a substantial renovation using this tax-exempt instrument as well as low-income housing tax credits, which will apply for after, hopefully, we get the bond allocation in early July. The part of that allocation, as well as the bonds, means that this property will be affordable for another 30 years. So we're going to do a large renovation, acquire the property, make sure that it's affordable for the foreseeable future, the next 30 years. And it's important to note that no tenant will be displaced, permanently displaced from this project. Right now, the property is encumbered by a Section 8 contract, which means residents pay 30% of their income, whatever that may be. Since these are seniors, typically, Social Security, it's pretty limited. That will not change. The residents will not change. Our goal is that after this renovation, these residents will remain there and enjoy a newly renovated property with fewer issues going forward. Just to get ahead of a couple additional questions, our plan is during the renovation that tenants it'll be a tenant in place. They won't be relocated off the site or anything like that. We will be doing substantial renovations in the units, but we'll ask the residents to leave between the hours of 9 and 5, and the work will be done during those hours. The residents will return to their units at night. We will have a resident services coordinator as well as a relocation coordinator handling this, a full-time person dedicated to the residents during this time. And we will set up areas in the community room as well as other units where residents can enjoy and spend those hours that they would otherwise be in the units. And again, that's only during working hours, Monday through Friday. Thank you for the time, and happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you both. Are there questions from members of the council for the bond counsel or the developer? And I appreciate the information you provided about how that process will work with the residents. That was an important concern on my part, and I knew we couldn't necessarily tie that to the financing, but I wanted to understand it better. Councilmember Schroeder.
Actually, I had a question for our finance director.
Absolutely.
Excuse me. Thank you.
The amount of staff time and expense that will be necessary to get this moving, will the fee cover that expense, including the legal expense?
Absolutely. So we already collected a $2,500 fee, which is a standard fee, part of our conduit debt application. So we collected that. That includes my time and just communication with the developer, with our attorney, and being here at this meeting this evening as well. But as far as the 1% fee will be sufficient, will be solely collectible by the city, and it's going to be funds that are going to be available for the city for any use. We are not going to be responsible for any of the legal services provided by Taft, so those legal services are going to be paid by the developer. So the city is not incurring any cost at this point for this process.
So it's just your time?
Yep, just my time.
Okay.
And that is covered by the $2,500
The
fee?
$2,500 fee. Yep.
Okay.
And it's my time. It's already paid by you guys. So that $2,500 goes to the city's general fund operating budget. But just to clarify one thing, I've learned this through conversations earlier today. We met, we communicated through emails, and I think somewhere between the lines, I kind of got lost in the details. But the application is going to be up to $23 million. And they are hoping to get $23 million. So the 1% fee is going to be more of in the line of $230,000 instead of $90,000. So it's a significant amount of money that we can be bringing to the city. And again, there's no restrictions surrounding the use of these funds.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? Councilmember Groff?
I'm sure it was in here, but how long is the bond for?
Well, that's a good question.
Oh. It wasn't in there.
17 years, I think we put in there.
I think that's a little TBD at this point.
That's fine.
Statutorily, it could be up to 30 years, but it's likely to be much less.
The anticipation is 16 to 17 years.
But it isn't tied to the 30 years of affordability.
Correct.
Okay.
But the regulatory agreement stays on the property.
Yes, I understand.
Even if those are paid off.
And that, I'm sorry. The regulatory agreement is a requirement of the IRS in order for these bonds to qualify as tax exempt obligations. So that's not something that could be negotiated down at a later date. That's what it would be, so.
One more question. Sure. Just a comment. I noticed that some of it was used for the elevator and the ADA compliance in the building. Is that out of compliance at this time?
I can get back to you on that. My understanding is that it might have been a grandfathered in situation that once you pull building permits, you then trigger.
Bring it up to
But for the ADA specifically, since we're, I mentioned low-income housing tax credits, we're going through MHFA. That program has certain requirements, specifically around ADA, as well as enterprise green communities. So they have a list of, to qualify for tax credits, you have to abide by certain requirements. So I know the ADA is definitely part of their requirements as well.
And can I have one more question? And then accessible units, are you having, I hope you're having a certain number that are wheelchair accessible.
That's right, yeah. So actually, I'm glad you brought that up. One point of clarification, I mentioned that residents will be back in their units at night. That is not true for a certain number of ADA units because we're moving walls in certain, situations, moving countertops. They will either be relocated on site for the duration of that renovation, which means that we have a vacant unit, we do it up, we move them in there, and then we move them back to their original unit once it's finished. Or if there's no space, which we don't anticipate, but it's possible, we would find them a hotel and organize transportation.
Thank you.
All right. And just a clarification perhaps for members of the public. So part of the reason that this type of financing is used for affordable projects is the tax exempt status of the debt as opposed to having to finance it as a taxable type of funding that provides a benefit in terms of the cost of the project overall, as I understand it.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right.
Yes.
And so that's the sort of nexus with public benefit that's tied to this type of financing.
And just to be clear, the developer could have used any municipality in the area, not just us, to help him issue the debt. So they did want to have a tie connected when we were speaking with the city as being the issuer as well as for the benefit of this for the city. So that's also important to note.
And we have done this before. Do you
Right.
remember when it was?
No, I'm not sure, but I think we have in the past also
know
done
we
it
have.
for
It's
entities
been
that
a
were
while.
not in the
Yep.
city of
Right.
Roseville. So
Right.
it's a nice thing for, as was noted, for our finances.
Absolutely.
All right. We'll double check if there's anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this item this evening. Does not appear to be the case, so we do have the request to adopt the resolution in the packet, which grants preliminary approval to the issuance of the multifamily housing revenue bonds, et cetera.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Strawn, seconded by Councilmember Groff to adopt that resolution granting the preliminary approval as outlined. Discussion on the motion as the maker, Councilmember Strawn.
I have friends who do a lot of volunteer work at that particular facility, and I've heard it can be seen as somewhat sad. And so I'm really happy for the people who do live there that maybe that isn't the end outcome, that it has some hope and some positive vibes about it. I was excited to see that your organization is a B Corps as well. So the mission of your organization is somewhat altruistic. It's not just to gain a dollar somewhere else. So I appreciate that, and I look forward to having those folks in that unit and those units there having a place that they feel comfortable in and that suits their needs as they are today.
Thank you.
As the seconder, Councilmember Groff.
Yeah, thanks for doing this because it did need, that building did need, I'm working real estate and I have been familiar that needed work. And it does apply to one of our aspirations as a city of Roseville to have housing for all levels of our population. And I'm glad we're going forward with this one. I hope we are anyway. Vote.
Other discussion on the motion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? That passes unanimously. That resolution is adopted, and we look forward to success in the process and seeing you back here for the public hearing.
Thank you all.
All right. Thank you. And Mr. Magarano doesn't get to go anywhere because the next item on the agenda is also him. And that is to do, I guess, what we might call our final review of year-end 2025 cash reserve levels and our annual adjustments that we make to address fund balance matters.
Which one? This one right here?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a mouse.
Well,
Oh, so. Oh, okay. All right.
yeah, that hasn't been working all night. Maybe we'll know.
Okay, well, this is back. We've had an attempt about a month ago, but we did complete in our financials and financial audit. We're looking at issuing our report tomorrow, actually, and we'll be bringing that to council for approval, final approval at the May 11th meeting. So that opened an opportunity for us to really get a good sense of what our general fund is at the end of 2025, and some of the other funds that there's a policy surrounding the fund balance and the reserves that should be considered in those funds. So with that, I put together a quick analysis that I'm going to be walking you through this evening. All right, so the purpose of this policy surrounding the fund balance is to continue financial stability, to establish best practices, to meet future operational and capital needs, as well as being fiscally responsible with our funds. Okay, so the fund balance policy, it does provide a cushion against unexpected revenue and income interruptions. If you recall, one of the main reasons that we like to have fund reserves is of the timing when revenue are remitted to the city from the county, with the two settlements during the year. So one is our residents are paying their property taxes by May 15th, and typically we get our first settlement usually in June and July, and then the second portion of the property taxes are due October 15th. And typically we get our settlements collected in November and December, with the final settlement the future year in January. So that timing of receiving these funds can be difficult to manage our cash flow. So one of the reasons we have a fund reserve policy is to really meet that cushion of unexpected revenue income interruptions, and also provide a working capital by ensuring sufficient cash flow to meet the city's needs throughout the year, and provide funds to address unexpected or unplanned events. With that, I provided in the packet the current fund reserve policy. So the general fund has a fund reserve policy of 35% up to 50%. The recreation fund is between 20 and 30%. Our communication fund, 10% to 30%. And our licensing center is 10% to 15%. Now, there's other funds that have a reserve policy that we're not going to be discussing this evening, especially those enterprise funds, our utility funds, which they have different benchmark, and depending on their cash flow, they're not supported by tax levies. So we're actually been focusing mostly on those funds that are supported by tax levies. Okay, so the analysis kind of presenting the following findings. Our general fund, at the end of 2025, if we wouldn't do the transfer, will follow below its low target of 35%. We're looking approximately 29.66%. And that represents $1.6 million short of that low 35%. If we wanted to bring this fund at its high target, that would require about $6.1 million. The Park and Recreation Fund, on the other hand, it's above its highest target of 30%. It's currently projecting at 31.08%. That's about $738,000 over the 20%, or $72,000 over its high target of 30%. The Communication Fund, it shows a deficit in that fund reserve. Not a deficit, but it's not meeting its lowest point, target low point of 10% by approximately $40,000. If we wanted to bring that fund at its high target of 30%, we would need about approximately $180,000. And lastly, the License Center Fund also is above its reserves of 10% by approximately $637,000, and it's above its high target of 15% by approximately $506,000. And the Cash Reserve Fund, if you're familiar with that fund, has been used in the past to really, any of these funds that had surplus, we would really recommend to move those reserves in this fund if all of these funds will be over their high targets. But since there are a couple funds that are below their lower targets, we're actually recommending using the cash reserves of $926,000 to help those funds bring back those reserves to their lower targets. So the general fund is the main one that needs that $1.6 million, and as well as the communication funds needs $40,378,000. With that, I can take any questions to this point before I make a recommendation, but are there any questions based on this analysis?
Any questions?
Okay.
Does not appear to be the case.
All right. So good question. Maybe you might ask yourself, what caused the decrease in reserves in the general fund, right? It's a fair question. There's several factors that I've considered and kind of looked at. One is typically the conservative budget approach that the U.S. Council take, and we as staff during the budget year. We're really focusing on keeping the tax levy as low as we can. So to do that, sometimes we are focusing and we're utilizing the reserves as much as possible. So for example, for the 2025 budget, we actually, for the general fund, we had the reserves, we used the reserve approximately $227,000. What that means is that we did not have a balanced budget with revenues meet expenditures. We actually used reserves to offset the decrease in the revenues, and that decrease was applied to property taxes. So that's one reason the decrease in the general fund balance. Second, we've done that with the 2026 budget. We utilized approximately $145,000 of fund reserves. But also we've had an increase. Every year we have an increase in the budget, right? So 2026 budget was a $3.8 million increase. And not all of those expenditures have a source, an outside source of revenue rather than tax levy. Some do. So in that $3.8 million, if we had grants or intergovernmental revenues, they were applied. But in some instances, we don't have an outside source of revenues. So then the fund reserves always compares it to the next year's budget expenditures. So we're not comparing our reserves to the current year's expenditures, but it's always comparing to the next year's expenditures. So we're ending 2025, and then we're looking at our reserves compared to next year's expenditures. So our purpose and our goal is to meet next year's future obligation, not this current year that ended. So that budget always going to go up every year. So our reserves are going to go up. We're going to need more money. And especially if we're using fund balance reserves, we're also decreasing that fund balance throughout the year. And lastly,
Just to clarify,
yes.
Our reserves aren't going up every year, but our reserve requirement to meet the policy is going up.
Absolutely. So as the next year's budget goes up, also our reserves requirement goes up.
Yeah.
Yep. And lastly, the governmental funds can also shore resources to maintain a lower tax levy with council approval. That's why we're here this evening as well. And just to kind of a little bit of background, the Parks and Recreation Fund that we're looking to take some of that money It has been established to better monitor that activity in the fund, but technically that fund is also a governmental fund. In other cities, as we discussed in the past, some of the activities of the Parks and Recreation funds are lumped together with the general fund. For example, also the License Center Fund, even though it's a special revenue fund, with council approval, we can use some of these reserves to meet operating costs in the general fund as well. Same with the Communication Fund. Again, a lot of these funds have been established for better tracking and monitoring the activity, individual activity of these funds. And the Cash Reserve Fund also, that we're taking that big chunk of $900,000, that's reported with the general fund on the financial statements, and it's consolidated with that general fund. It has been like that all along. All right. So those are kind of the main reasons why the fund reserves went down. And I also took it a little bit further and kind of looked at the general fund. At year end, it had a net income change of about approximately $1.5 million. And I kind of looked, okay, why did that happen? Why did we have a positive net income change? Well, the revenues were up about $468,000 at year end, excluding any fund balance transfers that were proposing this evening. They were about $468,000 over. We had we were over budget in the licensing and permits. We were over budget in the intergovernmental funds and charges for services due to Rosedale Center security that came over. We were over the budget in court fines. Our interest earnings came over budget. A large portion of that $448,000 does include market value adjustments, which is not really a true revenue unless we decide to sell or exit some of those investments, which we're not. But then also we were under budget in revenues for property taxes, and that's a big number there. So what that means is that there were a lot of petitions with the county, and when petitions are approved by the county or a resident or a business wins a petition is they are disputing their property valuation for property taxes purposes. Those deductions actually are reducing our distribution of our property taxes for that year. So there were a large increase of these petitions the last few years. For this year, that was about approximately $588,000. So our percentage collection is, I think, below 98% right now. And there's some miscellaneous revenues on the budget as well. We budget that we're going to be receiving more funds from the state fair reimbursement. I think it's more related to security there or some other programs. I'm not really sure what we do there.
Parking?
No, it's really probably for the overtime we incurred back to the 50s.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay.
So we invoice them, and we have no agreement that they're going to pay, but we invoice them for the extra time. So
Have they
Yeah.
paid in the past?
I think they have sometimes, but not consistent.
And I'm not sure if we used less, we provided less support or what happened, but looking at the budget to actuals for that line item, we were about $140,000 less.
As you know, it's an ongoing concern and issue, and we can't seem to get traction and really having some type of agreement to do that. But regardless, we need to provide extra folks on the street when those things are happening. So here we are.
Yeah, but overall, when I say over budget in the revenues, it's a good thing. So the net impact was positive, $468,000 over budget. On the other hand, the expenditures were over budget, which in this case is a bad thing because we were about $300,000 more than we budgeted in expenditures, and primarily was driven by public safety overtime personal costs. So when I looked at our budget to actuals and overtime line for these departments, for police and fire, both of them came significantly over their budget. So that's something we actually have to seriously address with the 2027 budget, because the 2026 budget actuals already trending higher than anticipated. So I anticipate this will be an issue for 2026 as well. So we're hopefully addressing that for 2027 budget. With that, the proposed transfer this evening to be rebalancing the reserves, we're recommending transferring that $1.6 million in transfers into the general fund from these following sources. We're going to be looking to taking from the license center surplus of $637,643, and that will bring the license center fund balance to its lowest point of 10%. we're looking at utilizing all the cash reserves in Fund 105, $926,008, and we're looking to take the additional difference from the Parks and Recreation Fund, $40,978. These three transfers will bring the general fund balance up to its 35% low target fund balance. So that's the first request this evening. And the second is to approve a transfer of $40,378 in transfer into the communication fund from the following sources. We're going to be recommending using these funds from the Parks and Recreation Reserves, Fund 200. And this transfer will bring the communication fund 110 balance up to its 10% low target fund balance. And with that, I have a visual how this will be rebalancing after this transfer. So as you can see here, the general fund will be at its lowest point of 35%. And then the park recreation funds will be taking approximately $80,000 out of it. Will be bringing its fund balance reserves to 29.86%, just below its high target. And then the communication fund will be at 10%, and the license center fund will be at 10%. And the cash reserve at this point will be 0. Yep, and with that, I can take any additional questions you might have.
All right, I'm going to just clarify one thing. So I think our cash carry forward policy is that the amounts over the high targets in various funds would be swept into the cash carry forward fund, which is a sub-fund within the general fund. So in the case of the Parks and Recreation Fund, according to that chart, it's about 72,102. And for the License Center Fund, that's about 506,028. And I noticed that both of those numbers are lower than the number that the total that we're asking to transfer to the various funds. So I just wanted to note that that is sort of additional transfers in addition to our policy transfer. And it sounds like you're also suggesting we just do the transfers direct rather than sort of sweeping and then allocating from.
I think it's really extra work and extra things to approve. I mean, we can direct these transfers to be going straight into the general fund, and without passing it through the reserve fund. Yep.
Which is a sub-fund of the general fund.
Yes, it's a sub-fund anyway.
Yeah.
So
the main thing was I wanted to point out that we're actually looking to transfer, at least in 2 of the cases, more than what our policy
we need.
talks about. And in the case of the License Center Fund, that's actually getting us down to the minimum of 10% at that point. We're basically transferring everything that is above the 10% target. And that creates some questions in my mind, but I'm becoming more comfortable with it as the evening progresses.
Yeah, I mean, I wish you could follow the policies as is stated, to only transfer the surplus to keep those funds at their highest point. But in this year, there's a little bit more need than that we can do. So we have to transfer a little bit more than to bring those. Like the Parks and Recreation Fund is going to drop at 29.86. So close to the high target of 30%, but not quite. But the licensing center from 15%, which is the high target, we will be at 10. So ideally, we wouldn't have transferred that much, but in this situation, I don't think we have many other options. We can consider increasing the levy next year, but just to remind you, the fund balance reserve is important to show at year end. So this journal entry is going to be posted in 2025. This is going to be part of our 2025 report. So this entry is not a 2026 journal entry, it's going to be a 2025. And one of the reasons we want to do that is because what's coming ahead, especially with the bond issuance, a lot of times if we have to go through another bond rating call, they will be looking at our reserves. So if our reserves are going to be below the recommended Office of the State Auditor, which is 35%, that might not be favorable for us. So one of the things we want to get this done, finding these resources and allocating these resources to the general fund to help the general fund maintain its low target at 35%. Yep.
And if I understand the transfers correctly, if we only did the policy transfers, we'd be overall about $140,000 short. of which about 100,000 roughly would be the shortage in the general fund, which puts us at something under 35%.
Yep, we'll be under 35%. So
Yeah.
at that point,
Yeah.
we recommend to kind of taking more from the parks a little bit more. And actually, the license center has a different cash flow, and I think we could have split in between the two funds. I think there were some upcoming projects in the Parks and Recreation that might be coming over budget. So we thought we would take a conservative approach and keep that fund at its closer to its higher target versus the license center that right now is just kind of operating pretty well. And it's already projecting to have a surplus in revenues already Q1, as we'll be seeing at the probably you've already noticed that on the staff report for the Q1 financials. So I'm comfortable with this recommendation. I think Mr. Turgeon and I met and discussed about it, and you may ask as well. But we can always look if we need more funds in the license center at that point to bring in a transfer from a different source. But for year-end purposes and to keep that general fund at 35, I think this will be our best scenario right now.
Right, and just two follow-ups on that. One is, when you say the license center fund is coming in, revenues are coming in ahead of projections, is that taking into account the budgeted, if there was a budgeted transfer to the general fund already kind of built into the license center operations?
Not necessarily. We're not looking at the fund balance projection. We're looking at budget to actual within the quarter.
Okay.
Like what we actually budgeted for revenues.
Got it.
So those are over what they're coming in.
Okay.
And the fund balance impact, if we're coming overall, let's say 4 quarters, we're over budget, so year end, that surplus is going to go into the fund balance ultimately.
Right.
Increasing the fund balance again for this.
And then I just did the quick calculation. If you took about $100,000 out of the general fund balance on the table that's there, it gets you to 34.667%. So it's really
It's
close
very
to
close.
35.
I'm more comfortable being at 35. I think it's 35 point something. The financial statements, I think after it's all said and done, it's 35.01 or 2, something like that. So we're right there. Yep.
All right.
Absolutely.
We need to show fewer decimal places. Right?
Yeah.
All right. That answers my questions.
Absolutely.
I'll certainly freed up for the rest of the council. Councilmember Schroeder.
Yes, well, and I think another point is with the license center, their revenue is coming on a continual basis.
Right.
Where some of the other funds, that's more relying on, and I know we have some Parks and Rec there, but I think a lot of the other ones where we only have the revenue coming in on a less frequent basis.
Yep.
So that's, I'm comfortable with that. And also, this is what the cash reserve fund was meant to be, is there when we had a shortage to be able to, what had been put in there ahead of time from previous years this is when we want to use it. And actually, if you really think about it, this is like taking from the right pocket and putting it in the left pocket. So in a way, we are transferring, but in a way, it's becomes one, it all comes up to the top when you're looking at it from an audit standpoint.
It does. From a financial statement presentation, that's kind of our goal with these transfers to really,
Yes.
we created these funds, as I mentioned earlier, to really have a better understanding of the activities in the cities, like the Parks and Recreation Fund. Some cities have it as a department, part of the general fund, and they only track the programs as a separate special revenue funds. And when I mean programs, it's volleyball, basketball, and just those type of programs, but nothing related to the parks maintenance and operation of our parks. Those will be a department in the general fund. So here it's a large program, right? So it makes sense to want to have a better handle on how the department, how those funds are doing. Same with the license center. And then the communication as well, I think, has been created just to have a better understanding how much money we're spending specifically and what other resources can we bring in the table.
It
What's the
helps
levy?
It helps us see
Yep.
what's actually going on. And my last question is kind of related, is we're going to get the audit before, long before the night before when you're going to present it, right?
The audit is going to be presented on May 11th,
Next Monday.
next
So
Monday.
I would like to make sure, because that's a big document.
So you'd rather
and
get it before Thursday.
I need it before Thursday.
Yeah. So I think we're gonna officially wrap it up and get a final report done tomorrow. We've had a final review and went through all the changes with the auditors today.
And then you'll have this.
Yep, this actually has been already posted in the report. I was really hopeful that this will be supported. If it's not, then we might have to delay for another couple hours. But if this is not supported, we'll be definitely looking at presenting reserves under the policy and under the OSA recommendations. So I think we don't want to do that.
So yeah, like I
Personally.
said, the sooner we can get a copy of that audit, the better. I'd be happy to
Yeah.
drive over and get
I
it.
think we can have it ready tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the goal. I think tomorrow we should have a copy. My plan is to get the staff report no later than Wednesday and have all the information available in the staff report for the
Just
11th.
send the audit report out.
Just let me know. I'd be happy to come get it too, if that makes.
I can email them to all of you, or if I can make some copies as well if somebody
I would prefer
prefers.
a copy.
Sure,
Thank
absolutely.
you. Okay.
Yeah, and we'll bring some really nice copies at the meeting on the 11th too, more hard copies style. Yep.
Right. I'll request not to have a hard copy.
Same.
Okay. Absolutely.
Other questions for staff? Otherwise, I believe it is a request. Oh, I should check if there's anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this item.
We got somebody.
Why not?
Why not?
Why not?
Someone's got to do something around here. We got to get some people in here.
Well, you came all this way.
We got to get some people in here.
We're just glad to see you again and
Yeah.
that
Yes.
you're here and hail
Up
and
and
hearty.
about.
Yeah.
Well, Roger Hess
that you're
Wagner
famous.
place. So these numbers are probably over 4 months old. So how has it gotten any better since then, or has it gotten worse?
We do have our quarterly financial report as one of the items in our consent agenda this evening, so that would be an opportunity to take a look at that and see how things are going. Mr. Magarano, just generally speaking, are things better or worse?
Yeah, I mean, in fund balance terms, we're beginning with 35% reserves. I think overall, the quarter looks good. It's hard to tell at this point. Like I said, quarter one, and one of the reasons I decided to do quarter one on consent is typically we don't have a lot of activity. There's not a lot of the revenues collected to date. So it's kind of hard to tell. The expenditures, I can speak more on those. They are trending under budget, but there's a reason for that too. Our largest cost drive here is personnel cost. And the way we budget for personnel cost is we budget at the highest rate for an employee, because there's two different things that happen throughout the year, right? We get a cost of living adjustment on 1/1, and then the employees get their step increases or promotions throughout the year on their anniversary date. And those dates differ for everyone at a different point. So it's kind of hard to capture a full quarter of activity of personal cost. So if you look in the report, I think those came under 25%, which would be an expectation of a normal business. You say, okay, I have a quarter of 3 months, I should be at 25% of expenditures. I think we're more than 17 to 19 range for most of the departments right now. And there's no departments that have been over budget right now. So as of quarter one, we're doing really, really well. Let's see how we do quarter two and quarter three when some of those expenditures starts hitting a little bit different and some of the revenues are coming through more consistently too, because we're going to have the first elemental revenues coming in June, July, but then also some of the programs are starting in the parks because they're seasonal too, so none of those revenues have hit our books. So quarter one is pretty kind of mellow in most cities. Quarter two is more active, and usually quarter four is really wrapping it up. So it's kind of hard to predict. We are doing, as of now, we're in a 20% to budget range, which is good.
So has the XL fee started coming into the general fund? Because that should be putting over $2 million into the general fund.
Yep, so the franchise fees, we received our first disbursement of funds in April. That's trending a little bit lower than what we expected, because that was due to the timing of the franchise fees actually coming to effect. I believe it was as of March 1st, even though we want it to be as 1/1. I think it's really based on the resolution approved. But from that point, I think Xcel Energy takes about 60 to 90 days to implement the franchise fees. It is not working retroactively. So I think when we budgeted our process, we took that in account that revenues are going to be less this year. So our first disbursement so far has been $40,000.
But still, that's going to add like about $2 million every year, won't it?
It will. I think on our budget process, if we're looking at our budget process, we have already planned how those funds are going to be spent. So budget to actual, we didn't bring any revenues yet, but we will.
And the last thing, I still like don't want you guys taking money out of the license fund, because every dollar you take out means that's another dollar you have to bond for when you build a new building. It would have been nice if over the last 20 years you left all the money in there and could have built a building without having to issue bonds. And it looks like you've got $63 million that you're investing right now, and some of it goes out for like 12 years. So I'd rather see you take 1.6 million of the money you're not going to use for 10 or 12 years and use that to fill this hole.
I wish it was that
Because
simple.
if you even make 4%, that's only $64,000 a year.
There's a lot of rules and things.
So-
we can meet on a
Yes.
one-on-one basis about that. And
So-
we can talk about finances.
All right.
Acknowledging the comments and the questions. Thank you. And I broke our own rule by engaging in conversation, so it's my
So did I.
fault. So, all right.
I didn't talk for 3 minutes.
No, you definitely didn't. You definitely did not, and
Thank you.
that is noted for the record. All right.
I would make the motion if you're ready for that, Mayor.
I think we're ready for it.
Second.
All right. And so specifically, this is a motion to
As request.
make the transfers
Yes, the
as
transfers.
requested.
Exactly.
All right. It was moved by Councilmember Groff, seconded by Councilmember Strawn. Discussion on the motion, Councilmember Groff.
Well, thanks for doing all this work. This was an excellent presentation. It makes it very clear, having been here for several years, but the first year I remember going through this was very confusing to me. So I appreciate the work in it, and it all makes sense to me. I like making the funds at least up to the minimum, and it makes sense for any bond proposals we need to go forward with. So I'm supporting it.
All right. As the seconder, Councilmember Strawn.
Thank you. And again, yes, thank you for the work you've done, the presentation and the way you laid things out. I find it really easy to understand, and I hope that means that the general populace also feels that way when they look at it, that it makes good sense. Obviously, 5 or 6 years in, it's a little easier to get the whole piece, but no, I really appreciate all the pieces that you've sent along have been very informative, and your presentation was very helpful, so thank you.
Thank you.
Other discussion on the motion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, and that transfer, or those sets of transfers as outlined are authorized. That concludes our business items this evening. We don't have any items, councilmember-initiated items to take up at this time, so we can move to consideration of a number of sets of minutes, and I think we did get a revised set of our April 6th council minutes, just making a couple of corrections on pages 21 and 24.
Yes.
And those have been noted. Are there any other changes or corrections to those minutes? I believe we could conceivably take them up as a single motion. I don't believe anybody missed those meetings to abstain.
I would move to approve all of the minutes as shown with the corrections on the bench handout.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Schroeder, seconded by Councilmember Groff to approve those minutes as presented, including the updates to the April 6th minutes as handed out to this evening. Discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? That passes unanimously. Those minutes are approved. That brings us to the consent agenda. Mr. Trudgeon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 12A approves payments in the amount of $1,303,260.14. Item 12B approves expenditures for a portable emergency generator, a landscape maintenance contract with Sandstrom for miscellaneous street rights-of-way, purchase of turnout gear for our firefighters, purchase of 2 new 12-passenger vans for Parks and Recreation Department to replace 20-year-old vehicles, and the rehab and modernization of a 33-year-old elevator at the Oval. This action also approves the sale of a police vehicle being rotated out of service. Item 12C approves the renewal of the 2 a.m. liquor license for the AMC Theaters of Rosedale. Item 12D receives the quarterly grant report. To date, the city has received $1.4 million in grant funds. Agenda item 12E approves a no parking resolution on Hamlin Avenue between County Road C and Snelling Avenue. As part of the Hamlin Avenue Rehabilitation Project, the roadway will be narrowed and therefore parking must be restricted on the entire stretch of Hamlin. Agenda item 12F approves a resolution awarding the contract for the Cohansey Sanitary Sewer Lift Station Project to Kemper Companies in the amount of $404,600 after a competitive best value bid process. Item 12G approved entering into a cooperative agreement with Ramsey County for the Hamlin Avenue Rehabilitation Project, County Road C and Snelling. The city will serve as lead on the project. Item 12H receives the first quarter financial report. Item 12I approves entering into an amended joint powers agreement with Ramsey County for the Violent Crime Enforcement Team. This amended agreement is being required due to two agencies dropping out of the joint powers agreement. And item 12J approves awarding a contract for Hamlin Avenue Rehabilitation Project to Forest Lake Contracting in the amount of $4.56 million after a competitive bid process. It should be noted that this bid and all other bids were received for this project were higher than the original engineer's estimates. While it's not totally clear, the higher cost may reflect increased fuel and transportation costs related to the project. That's not a trend we continue to see with our projects. These costs of this project are being shared with the cities of Roseville and Arden Hills and Ramsey County, and that is the consent agenda.
All right, is there a motion on the consent agenda this evening?
Second.
It's moved by Councilmember Groff, seconded by Councilmember Strawn.
Can I have a question in there?
Certainly.
Under the AMC theaters, do we do compliance checks there? For
Yeah, we do.
age?
Yeah.
And did any come in? Because I didn't see them listed here.
As far as the compliance checks,
Or the
failing.
fails?
No, I don't think they've ever failed. As far
Because
as
I've always been worried about that in the
Sure.
theater.
No, it's a good question, but no, we do
Yeah, I don't
do
think-
compliance checks.
okay.
But I don't recall us ever having.
Okay, thanks.
Having a liquor license there is relatively new in the last.
Yeah, it's only
Right.
a couple years old. That's why I was wondering if we'd had any compliance checks or not.
All right, any other discussion on the consent agenda motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Those items are approved or received. That brings us then to future agenda review. Mr. Trudgeon, once again to you.
Yeah. All right, so as mentioned, we do have a meeting next Monday. We'll start off the evening with the EDA meeting. We do need to formally enter into a contract with Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity regarding the Land Trust Partnership and specifically the use of LAHA funds that the EDA previously discussed. This is the actual agreement. We want to have a conversation about the balance of the abatement fund and have some conversation about maybe putting that money to different use. And then also look to authorize release of the EDA Turning Legal Services RFP. At the regular meeting, we'll receive the audit report as we just talked about. And I have something on there, I guess, but just the audit report, nothing about the Board of Adjustment.
Okay.
We also want to have a discussion about the community survey. As you know, every 2 years, we try to do a community survey. We're bringing that back, so in your packet, you'll have all the questions we've asked before. We do want to have some conversations about some additional questions to help us engage the community and how we're doing on some of our strategic plan priorities. So we're working on some examples for you as well on there. And I would note that it's always an opportunity to look at the questions, make sure we still want to ask them, or if we want to ask new questions. We had about 6 or 7 questions in the last one that revolved around the sales tax. So those probably could be removed, so we have some capacity to add as well. And then have the city manager performance evaluation in closed session at the end of that meeting. On the 18th, we have several proclamations. As you can see, we also will have our kind of normal quarterly public hearing to consider certifying unpaid utility bills. Look to award the National Nature Playground Consultant Contract, Nature Center. And talking to Sam earlier today, we might be having a joint finance commission meeting with the members there. As you know, we have a new chair and new members there, so it'll be a good start of the year for them. I know they're talking about at their meeting next week. The 12th.
Between now and
Yeah,
then.
between now and then. Yeah. So assuming that they can sort that out and I'll make that big plan for that. That's all I have for that. You can see the June meetings here. We have only 2 regular business meetings, the 8th and 15th, and the 22nd is the Blues Fest Parade.
Which is not a meeting.
It's not a meeting, but
But we do publish it since
It
we're
is
all
posted,
together.
Right, yes.
my mouse here, and I won't plan on spending time on it, but in your packet is this update on the commissions. It's basically like, so just I'll just pull it up for information. We missed last time doing this, so this just kind of gives you, I know most of you watch the meetings or read the minutes, but this is a nice summary of kind of what they've been. So, for you and public's review, and that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Trudgeon. Are there any questions on the future agenda or councilmember initiated items for future meetings or reports or announcements or communications from council members?
Well,
Councilmember Groff.
Wednesday, if you should have already sent in your
Have they
your
extended the
reservation.
deadline again?
Boy, I think at this point, call me, but I don't want. Yeah, so it's Wednesday at 11:30. It's Northeast Youth and Family Services luncheon, and we're expecting a good crowd. So I look forward to that.
All right. Any other communications announcements? Otherwise, if there's no further business.
I wanted to add some of
Councilmember
the things
Stern.
that were, these will, I'm sure, come up onto our list as we get closer, but just our Juneteenth celebration is on June 13th. And one of our key contributors is not participating this year, so we'll really all need to give it an extra go to make sure it's a success. Discover Your Park starts on June 17th, and Live at the Rog every Sunday and Thursday is music starts on June 14th. And then the Rice and Larpenteur Alliance has an event on 5/16, so a week from Saturday. So just wanting to make sure that some of the local things, as it gets nice out, that we make sure we get out there and
Get 'em on
show
our
our.
calendar.
Yeah, and a few years ago, I made a push to try to get as many of us as possible up to Discover Your Parks. And that was because we were doing the Envision piece, but I still think it was really powerful. And last year, I continued to ride my bike to many of them. It really means a lot for people to see you. So if there's any way that we can rotate out or take turns or at least try to hit a few, I think it really makes a big difference to our residents for us to show up and be present. Rarely do they ask questions, but if they do, usually there's a lot of city staff around to help.
Right. All right. I did have just one thing actually just came in the mail right before the meeting here, and that is just a quick thank you to the city council members. Resident expresses gratitude for the efficiently run Roseville Cleanup Day, which was on April 25th. Everyone was helpful and kind, such an important service to the community. So once again, we get to take credit for something that we really didn't have a lot to do with directly, other than continuing to make it happen each year with our approvals. But I did want to point that out, and this is from resident Norma Jorgensen. So it's to the whole council, so wanted to read it at the meeting.
I would like to also add, a few weeks ago, I happened to use the Saturday services at the Kent Street Recycling Center. Amazing.
Yeah.
So efficient, so well laid out, and what a gift we have in this opportunity to recycle so many things there. When I talk to people from other cities, they can't believe what we're able to get rid of, and with no cost or little, if any, cost. So really make sure they're open on Saturdays from 9 to 4, I believe. So super convenient for people who work during the week to have that opportunity. It wasn't waiting. It was just
No.
it was very efficient. So a well-run organization. I highly recommend it.
Well, why don't we take credit for that too, since it's in Roseville, but it is Ramsey County's facility, and it is available to county residents. And I believe sometimes metro-wide residents can avail themselves of some of the services there too, as I seem to recall. So, but we'll take credit for it. All right, with that, if there's no further business before the council, the only other item on our agenda is a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All right.
Oh man, I didn't get it. Robin,
Close race. It was Councilmember Schroeder by,
I feel like I have to high
better
five
not
her.
use any horse racing analogies here. Seconded by Councilmember Strawn. No discussion on a motion to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. We are adjourned at 7:57 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Wow.